Hello everyone, Grandpa Ron here again. Hope you're having a great day. Got a little snow here, so it's a good day to be inside. We're going to continue our very basic Bible study today by looking at Genesis chapter 21. Verse 1, Then the Lord took note of Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. And what did he promise? He had promised Sarah that she was going to give birth to a son. And remember, she had laughed because it seemed so far-fetched because she was past the age of childbearing. She was in her mid-80s. Of course, we pointed out that that was probably younger in life than we would think of today because at that time people were living longer. So she was more like just beyond middle age maybe. God fulfilled his promise to her. And it says in verse 2, So Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the appointed time of which God had spoken to him. So, Abraham was about 100. Sarah was probably 86. But God honored his promise. And in just the right time, in God's timing, not Abraham's timing or Sarah's timing, in God's timing, he fulfilled this promise. Verse 3, And Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. Verse 4, Then Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded. So Abraham, if we've seen in the past, he made some mistakes, but he trusted God. His faith was kind of up and down in a way. But here he's 100% faithful, and he follows through with God's commandment regarding circumcision. Verse 5, Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Verse 6, And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. Well, she had originally laughed kind of in skepticism, like, oh yeah, sure, this is going to happen. But now she's laughing with joy. So she's very happy, joyful, and the people around her would be joyful too. And I know Abraham is joyful, not only because he has the promised son, but because I'm sure he's been telling the people around him, his family and the people, his workers and all, about this. And now any skepticism they had has been squashed by this miraculous birth of Isaac. Verse 7, And she said, Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. So you have barren Sarah, impotent Abraham, and this miraculous birth. God revived them both, and Isaac is born. Verse 8, And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. There's still countries today that do this, have this kind of a celebration party. This would have meant Isaac was 2 or 3 years old and was going to go on big boy food now instead of breast milk. And so Abraham threw a big party. And you'd think everybody would be happy, but if we look a little deeper, we'll see that's not the case. Verse 9, Now Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking. Now that would be Ishmael. And Ishmael would have probably been a teenager, 17 years old, I think they've computed. He'd be about that old right now. And so you have this 17-year-old mocking this 2 or 3-year-old kid. Now, mocking in the original language was a lot more powerful, and it conveyed not just making fun of, like we would consider it today, but actually persecuting or abusing all the way up to possibly having thoughts of murder. But in this case, it's clear that there is more to it than just poking fun, because of the reaction we're going to see from Sarah here in a minute. Verse 10, therefore she, Sarah, said to Abraham, drive out this maid and her son, for the son of this maid shall not be an heir with my son Isaac. And the matter distressed Abraham greatly because of his son. Now Abraham loved Isaac, but you remember Ishmael. But you remember Ishmael was characterized as a donkey of a man, a wild donkey, against everyone and everyone against him, kind of a wild guy. That was the expectation of him growing up. And it looks like that's the case. But you remember that Sarah had treated Hagar harshly when Ishmael was first born, because Hagar had kind of thrown it up in Sarah's face that, I'm the one that gave birth first, and you're barren, and kind of made fun of Sarah. And so Sarah treated her harshly. But remember, God came to her, Hagar, and said, no, go back and be obedient. Ishmael is still going to be the father of great nations and stuff. And so she did. But there had to be some resentment there, and it might have festered. And as far as Ishmael is concerned, he can see his chances of being an heir, going out the window now that Abraham has the son that was promised to him by God. So anyway, you see this friction, and it's a little deeper than the word mocking conveys. And Abraham was concerned about it because he loved Ishmael, but I think he could see that there was a irreconcilable situation coming up here. And so God intervened to put Abraham's mind at ease. Verse 12. But God said to Abraham, do not be distressed because of the lad and your maid. Whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her, for through Isaac your descendants shall be named. Not through Ishmael, but through Isaac. And don't worry about him. I'll take care of that. But you listen to what Sarah's telling you in this case, and take action. Verse 14, so Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to them, to Hagar, putting them on her shoulder, and gave her the boy and sent her away. And she departed and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. So this was a serious matter. I guess the closest comparison we could have today would be a totally disowning Ishmael to protect and preserve the heritage that was going to be generated by Isaac. Isaac would be the heir based upon God's command. Verse 15, and the water in the skin was used up, and she left the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him about a bow shot away, for she said, do not let me see the boy die. And she sat opposite him and lifted up her voice and wept. So Hagar is heartbroken, of course. It's really a heart-wrenching situation. And the water's run out, and she is weeping, but I'm sure she's praying as well. And it appears that Ishmael was probably praying too. Because verse 17 says, and God heard the lad crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what is the matter with you, Hagar? Do not fear, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Okay, so God has heard this prayer. He's heard the crying of the baby and is going to comfort Hagar in the next verses. Verse 18, "Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him by the hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin with water, and gave the lad a drink. So they're saved. There was a well there. She couldn't see it. God opened her eyes after she prayed to him. Verse 20, "And God was with the lad, and he grew, and he lived in the wilderness and became an archer. And he lived in the wilderness of Paran. And his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt." So remember, she was originally from Egypt, and her heart probably still in part was back in Egypt. So she picked an Egyptian wife. Verse 22. "Now it came about at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, spoke to Abraham, saying, 'God is with you in all that you do.'" So this is about the same time, I suppose, because it says came about at that time. So shortly after this, or pretty close to it. And they recognize how prosperous Abraham was. Herds flourishing. He was doing very well. And they said, verse 23, "Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me, or with my offspring, or with my posterity, but according to the kindness I have shown to you, you shall show me, and to the land in which you have sojourned." So Abimelech remembers that Abraham had lied to him, remember? Remember the Sarah's my sister story that they had used so many times? And it had caused considerable issues. Abimelech's household couldn't have kids anymore, and God appeared to him in a dream saying, "You're a dead man if you don't take care of this situation." So Abimelech had restored Sarah to Abraham, had given him cattle, had given him permission to live in the land. And now Abraham has prospered, may have even become stronger than Abimelech's clan. At least there was enough power there to make Abimelech worry. So he wants to get a pledge from Abraham. Verse 24, "And Abraham said, I swear it." A non-aggression pact. They're going to be buddies. Verse 25, "But Abraham complained to Abimelech because of the well of water which the servants of Abimelech had seized." Wells were very important back then, and the ownership was a big issue. And apparently Abimelech's servants had seized one of the wells. Verse 26, "And Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing, neither did you tell me, nor did I hear of it until today." So he pleads ignorance to the situation. It's probably correct. Verse 27, "And Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant." So they make a deal. "Then Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said to Abraham, What do these 7 ewe lambs mean which you have set by themselves?" So this kind of a separate agreement here about to happen. Verse 30, "And he, Abraham, said, You shall take these 7 ewe lambs from my hand in order that it may be a witness to me that I dug this well." So he's wants to confirm and verify formally that this is Abraham's well. Verse 31, "Therefore he called that place Beersheba, because there the two of them took an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba, and Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, arose and returned to the land of the Philistines." So everybody's happy now. Verse 33, "And Abraham planted a tamarisk tree at Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. So, Abraham's response to all this is to acknowledge God and pray to God. Verse 34, and Abraham sojourned in the land of the Philistines for many days. So Abraham's still wandering around, but he's still trusting God. This situation with Isaac has strengthened his faith because God has lived up to his word, and against all logic has given him and Sarah the promised child, Isaac. And now we're going to see some very, very dramatic things happen with Isaac and his future. And we'll start that next time in chapter 22. I hope this has been helpful. And I hope you tune in next time. Thanks for watching. God bless. Bye-bye.